Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for tuning in today. Our topic is intermittent fasting, a subject that so many of us have heard about in the last couple of years, but really aren't sure what it is. My guest is Cynthia Thurlow, author of the book Intermittent Fasting Transformation. Cynthia is a nurse practitioner and a nutrition expert with two TEDx under her belt. She's been a speaker for two TEDx's. Cynthia, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Great to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the warm welcome.
So, intermittent fasting, as a health reporter myself, I've gotten a lot of angry blowback on this subject, mostly because so many people get frustrated when they hear about new science that contradicts what they've been taught and what they've learned and adhered to for so many years. And in the case of intermittent fasting, a lot of people are like, wait a second. We were always taught that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now you're telling me to skip breakfast. And, we've been told that you should eat little short snacks and graze all day long, that's the best for your health and that helps you lose weight. And this contradicts that. Can you address the contradicting science when it comes to intermittent fasting?
Great question. And it's a common misnomer. It's a common issue for many people when they've been told by their healthcare professionals, reinforced by health advocates, that we're supposed to be eating frequently and we're supposed to be eating throughout the day. And I would first start with the fact that if you really reflect on the fact that we as a species have been around a long time, if we weren't able to tap into fat stores for energy, it explains why we don't need to be eating quite so frequently. We're an overfed society. And so in many ways, we've conditioned our patients to believe that we need to be eating snacks and mini meals throughout the day to stoke our metabolism. And I would be the first person to indicate and identify that the best way to balance our health and balance our hormones, and that includes the key hormone insulin, is to eat with less meal frequency. Because when insulin is high in our bodies, like it is if you're eating throughout the day, eating snacks and mini meals, it makes it very hard to tap into fat stores to use as energy, and we gain weight. I would say, secondly, that breakfast being the most important meal of the day, really benefits the processed food industry, because if we are getting up in the morning and choosing to have a protein-fueled breakfast, that's very different than what the processed food industry has really allowed us to envision is the food choices that we're making in the morning, whether it's cereal or Pop-Tarts or oatmeal or things like that. They're really not beneficial to balancing our hormones. So kind of hitting back on the common myths and old antiquated dogma that many of us are raised with, I was certainly raised with it, is really helping patients unpack and understand that meal frequency and eating too frequently can be hugely detrimental. And you just have to really look at the statistics that we're seeing here in the United States and abroad in terms of metabolic health. And by that, I mean people dealing with diabetes and high blood pressure and a lot of health issues that I didn't even see at the beginning of my career that just are escalating and becoming more increasingly problematic. But when we're also touching on these subjects, it's really re-emphasizing for our patients and for individuals that, eating with less meal frequency will keep your insulin levels low, which will allow your body to tap into those fat stores, which will keep your blood sugar better balanced, which will ensure you're cognitively intact, you have plenty of energy, you're not getting hangry. And that is the antithesis of the information we've been giving out over the last 30 to 40 years, which, as I stated earlier, is really becoming problematic for, supporting metabolic health.
And, I've been reporting on intermittent fasting. And as a side note, I do intermittent fasting. I fast every day for 18 hours. I stop eating at 4 p.m. every day, and then I don't start up again until 10 a.m. the next day. So I'm a huge believer and a practicer of intermittent fasting. But it's really surprised me that it's taken so long, and it is taking so long to really convince the general public about what this idea is.
I've been fasting for about 6 years. And, certainly for myself, when I first started doing it, my family, my husband, my children thought it sounded a little bit crazy. But what I do find is that when you explain to people, it's just eating less often. If the word fasting is triggering or problematic, I just encourage people to really reframe their thoughts and think about it as you're eating less, you are choosing to eat less often. But what I find the most incredible thing is that when people dip their toe into the proverbial pond of intermittent fasting, within a week or two, people feel so much better that it helps reinforce the behavior. I do think that it's becoming more commonly accepted. You're seeing, obviously it was one of the most researched diets in 2019. So on many levels, I think there's an open curiosity towards it. But I remind people it's not new or novel. It dates back to biblical times. And I think it's really important for people to understand that it is gaining credibility because people are feeling like they're getting their lives back. All of a sudden, the stubborn pounds they couldn't lose in menopause are not so uncommon. They're able to get the gains, if you will. They're able to see the health benefits. And when in other ways they weren't able to do that with changing their nutritional plan, but just eating less often for many people, not even changing the foods they choose to eat, they're getting the results that they had been looking for, whether it's body composition or getting off medications. And I think that's really empowering. We're really hoping that we can empower more individuals to have a more active role in determining the trajectory of their health and wellness throughout their lifetime.
I'm really glad that you brought up what an ancient practice this is. And, in biblical times, people fasted when they had difficult problems that they needed answers to. And that makes perfect sense because, when you fast, and I've noticed this with myself, when you fast, and you just mentioned it, you think more clearly. It's very noticeable. And so, we see these movie stars and yourself, you look like $1,000,000 and you do it with intermittent fasting. But there are so many other reasons to do it other than just the way you look, the way you think, for one thing, and then just the amazing health benefits cognitively and otherwise. But before we get a little bit too deep into the health benefits, there are so many. Let's kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about what intermittent fasting is. I mentioned that I do it every day. I go 18 hours without food. I stop eating every day at 4 p.m. and then I don't start up again until the next day at 10. But that's just me. There are lots of different ways to do intermittent fasting. Can you describe some of them and the ones that you recommend?
Yeah, I like to start with a 16-8. So 16 hours fasted with an 8-hour feeding window, because that is attainable for most, if not all people. But there are so many amazing variations. I like to think about 24-hour fasts. I like to think about fasts where there are some individuals that will just fast 2 days out of the week, and the rest of the 5 days they will do their normal eating plan and then have less than 500 calories a day if they're a woman and less than 600 if they're a man. I actually think that sounds a whole lot harder than just fasting every day. But there's even, variations in types of fasting. There are people that do 3 to 5 day fasts. I always, encourage people to figure out what their goals are so that can help guide their decision-making process. But what you're always focused on is determining what amount of time are you going to eat within. There's even an OMAD, 1 meal a day, where there's a very compressed feeding window. For some people, that might be a 2-hour window. It might be a 4-hour window for other individuals. So I think it's really, it's important to kind of start the conversation with where's a great starting point. And so a 16-8 is a great starting point. And then once you have the basics down and you're thriving with doing fasting, then you can expand it into, more complicated fasts, longer fasts, fasts that are focused on different types of foods that you can consume or liquids that you can consume during your fasting window. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but there are definitely lots of variations. There are types of fasts I like to do as plateau busters, definitely different ways to improve your health quality and do it in a way that, the flexibility piece is really important. I think it's on so many levels that, you and I both fast every day. And depending on what my schedule is like, I might start my feeding window a little earlier on one day. I might start it a little later on another day. The beauty of fasting is that sometimes you forget that you're not so focused on food that you may go an extra hour without eating. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is fantastic. So recognizing that whether you're on vacation, whether your work schedule changes, whether there are other things that come up in your personal and professional life, you can adjust that fasting and feeding schedule based on your own needs. You don't need to be rigid. That's the beauty of fasting, is that it's designed to be flexible.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and be right back with Cynthia Thurlow. The book is called Intermittent Fasting Transformation. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we're continuing our discussion with Cynthia Thurlow, author of the book Intermittent Fasting Transformation. And Cynthia, let's talk about some of the health benefits. I remember the first thing that I ever heard about this was a study that was done in California among people who had cancer, and that fasting actually reduced the risk of cancer. Talk about why fasting is so good for fighting disease.
It's a great question and a really important one. So, certainly, I like to start from the place of insulin. It's this hormone that's not a bad hormone, but it gets a bad rap. And so, recognizing that a lot of different types of cancers, breast cancer, colorectal cancer, et cetera, can be directly tied into a lot of the dietary and lifestyle choices that we make. So, keeping insulin low can be critically important. And you keep insulin low when you're in a fasted state. We know when you're fasted, your body actually goes in and scavenges up diseased and disordered cells. This is a process called autophagy. Autophagy is a really important thing to really focus on, because when we recognize that what happens with cancer cells is that they are diseased, disordered cells, cells that go rogue, if you will. And we know when you're in a fasted state, your body has the opportunity, just like the trash man comes to your house, picks up the trash can and takes it away. Your body has this ability innately to get rid of what does not belong. So I would say first and foremost there, we know that when you're at a healthier weight, you are less likely to be implicated. You're less likely to be diagnosed with many of these, what they call modern day cancers that we're seeing. So I think it's important for, listeners to understand that, when you're in this fasted state, your insulin levels are low.
I have been really fascinated by the fact that some of the leading cutting edge Alzheimer's research shows that insulin resistance is one of the key risk factors, and therefore a lot of the newest Alzheimer's experts are recommending intermittent fasting to prevent Alzheimer's, especially for those of us who carry the Alzheimer's gene. Can you talk about that, the cognitive benefits, which we touched on a moment ago?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that's important for people to understand is that when we're in a non-fed state, so while we're fasted, our body intrinsically should be able to go in and use ketones or fatty acids as a fuel source. And so part of that improved cognition is because our blood-brain barrier is able to diffuse this special type of ketone called beta hydroxybutyrate directly across the blood-brain barrier, which helps with that mental clarity. But we also know, as you correctly stated, that Alzheimer's dementia has been implicated not only in some genetic susceptibilities, but also with insulin resistance. And I think really looking at, why women are so protected from the influence of Alzheimer's or being diagnosed with Alzheimer's at younger ages is that we know as women transition from perimenopause, the 5 to 10 years preceding menopause, into menopause, they become increasingly more insulin resistant, which means insulin levels are not responding as appropriately as they once had. And so I feel that, the metabolic health piece, which ties into Alzheimer's, which ties into insulin resistance, is one of the most important things about fasting, that eating less often can help protect brain health, not just now, but also as you transition into middle age and beyond. And, the issues surrounding the degree of insulin resistance can really be exacerbated by a lot of the hormonal changes that occur in women's bodies. We are losing progesterone and estrogen if it's not being replaced. And so I always encourage individuals to, be touching base with their healthcare professionals, finding out where they are, getting genetic testing if that's appropriate for you, to really be looking at your susceptibility to developing Alzheimer's, and then doing all the things you can with lifestyle medicine that can help lessen the likelihood you will develop these, chronic long-term disease states.
So, as I mentioned, you look like $1,000,000, and we know that intermittent fasting is a great way to look thin and beautiful. But Can you talk about your other your own personal situation, which you talk about in the book, how intermittent fasting affected your actual health?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think for so many of us, even as a healthcare professional, no one ever prepared me for the changes that would occur in my body as I transitioned into perimenopause. As I stated, it's that 5 to 10 years preceding menopause. And for the first time in my adult life, I got stuck. By stuck, I meant I was exhausted, I was tired, I couldn't sleep, I gained weight, uh, which is not surprising, would be frustrating for any woman to deal with. And so, in my way of determining how to better balance my hormones, I discovered intermittent fasting. And so, I was a little skeptical at first. There's a degree of cognitive dissonance for so many of us that this isn't what we were taught. This isn't what we feel comfortable with. This is something new. And so, within a few days of practicing intermittent fasting, I felt so much better. I felt so much more mentally clear. I started sleeping better. I eventually, lost the weight I had gained during this perimenopausal transition. And so I really want women and men, for that matter, to have hope that, as you make those transitions into middle age, that it's not your destiny, that you are going to have a diminished quality of life. In fact, I would make the argument that we can have a better quality of life because we can make better choices for our health. And so, on so many levels, that's why I'm so passionate about fasting, that I really want good information to be accessible to individuals so that they can, take a more proactive approach to wherever they are in their lifetime. I've got, people from 35 to 65 and up that have tried fasting and really embrace the benefits now. But my own personal journey is my pain point. It's my purpose. It's why I feel that it's such an important message to share after so many years of writing prescriptions. And there is a place for that. But even more importantly, the lifestyle medicine piece is so critically needed.
All right, we're going to take another break and be right back with Cynthia Thurlow. The book is called Intermittent Fasting Transformation. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we're continuing our discussion with Cynthia Thurlow. The book is called Intermittent Fasting Transformation. And so, Cynthia, a lot of people are like, wow, I could never go 18 hours a day or 16 hours a day or even 12 hours a day without eating. But it's really important to mention that 8 of those hours at least are when we're asleep. And really, it just kind of cuts out nighttime eating and early morning eating, right?
Absolutely. And I think that there's this common, misconception that, it's going to be arduous, it's going to be hard. And just like any change that we make to our lifestyle, it's a process, but you start low and slow. That's always the mindset that I come from, that you start with, removing snacking and then, not eating after dinner. And you do that over time, it becomes a little less overwhelming. And then before you know, it's a beautiful habit.
And so, what do you eat? Are there any restrictions about what you eat in that smaller window?
My feeling is I like individuals that follow me or interact with me to understand the concept of a clean fast. And so, clean fasting is black coffee, bitter tea, like black tea, green tea, water, or unflavored electrolytes during the fast. And that is going to yield the best results. I always say that people will sometimes come to me because they were told by a fit pro that they can have a handful of grapes or they can have bone broth or other things during their fast. I really like to emphasize the concept of a clean fast. But you did ask about, what do you like to eat during your feeding window? And for me, I'm very protein focused. I think most, if not all of us, don't eat enough animal-based protein. So protein and healthy fats, and then getting the bulk of our carbohydrates from non-starchy vegetables is a great focus. Some people aren't ready to eat a meal when they break their fast. So certainly doing bone broth is certainly a nice, nutrient dense option. Or perhaps you're going to have, a full fat yogurt with some nuts, so that you're getting some protein and some healthy fats, but really the experimentation to find out what makes your body feel great.
All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Cynthia Thurlow. The book is called Intermittent Fasting Transformation. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we are talking with Cynthia Thurlow, author of the book Intermittent Fasting Transformation. So, Cynthia, you were talking about the things to eat during the feeding window, and you really like to focus on protein, natural sources of protein, and fats. Can you drill down on that a little bit more about what people should be eating? What you recommend people eating?
Yeah, so protein is the most satiating macronutrient. Macronutrients are protein, fat, and carbs. So when you're really focused on a good piece of steak or chicken or fish, or you have eggs, you're really going to keep your body, you're going to feel full. You're going to shut off those appetite mechanisms. I do like healthy fats. If you have a piece of salmon, it's already got the healthy fats in it, or a ribeye. But obviously, if you're having leaner cuts of meat, you may want to add in some avocado or nuts, or maybe you add butter to a vegetable. I think that's a really great strategy, largely because it's going to keep you satiated, as I mentioned, but it's also going to balance your blood sugar. One of the really big issues that we have as a society is our blood sugar is terribly dysregulated, which means we deal with, energy slumps. We get tired after eating. We crave sweets. We have these periods of feeling hangry where we're hungry and angry. And so if you focus first on protein when you break your fast or eat any meals, you're going to fill up. You're going to shut off your appetite cues. You're going to support those hormones, leptin and ghrelin, and you're going to have much more energy. So I think protein first, followed by healthy fats if they're not already part of the animal-based protein, and then adding in non-starchy vegetables. And then determining, based on your activity, do you need to add in a piece of sweet potatoes, some rice, etc. And I feel like that's really the way to structure a meal for success.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Cynthia, how can people find out more about you, and where can they get your book?
Great, thank you. www.cynthiathurlow.com. You can purchase off of the website. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and your local book retailers. You can also find me on social media. I'm very active on Instagram as well as Facebook. And then I also have a podcast called Everyday Wellness, where you can hear a lot about fasting, and I bring on experts to talk about how to integrate this into your lifestyle.
All right. Well, Cynthia Thurlow, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great to see you.
Thank you so much.
And once again, the book is called Intermittent Fasting Transformation by Cynthia Thurlow. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Healthy Living. We'll see you again next time.